The wind howled outside as if trying to warn me not to enter that house. I, Carlos, a 35-year-old writer in search of inspiration for my next horror book, ignored nature's warning. I was desperate for a story that could save my declining career, and the legend of the werewolf supposedly inhabiting the abandoned mansion on the outskirts of the city seemed perfect. Standing before the imposing rusty iron gates, a shiver ran down my spine. The mansion loomed darkly against the night sky, its windows like empty eyes watching me. The once elegant garden was now overrun with weeds, creating deformed shadows under the full moonlight. The air was thick, heavy with a scent of decay and something else. Something wild. I swallowed hard, adjusting my backpack. Inside it, my laptop, a few cereal bars, a flashlight, and a recorder. The tools of my trade. I also carried the weight of expectations. From my editor, from the few fans I had left, and most importantly, from myself. This story had to be good. It had to be real. With a foreboding creak, I pushed the gate and stepped onto the property. Every step on the dry leaves sounded deafening in the sepulchral silence that surrounded the place. As I approached the main entrance, the details of the structure began to reveal themselves under the silver moonlight. The mansion was a curious mix of architectural styles, as if it had been built and renovated over several eras. The main facade featured neoclassical elements, with imposing columns supporting a second-floor balcony. The tall, arched windows were mostly intact, reflecting the moonlight like black mirrors. The roof, however, looked older, with uneven tiles and a circular turret in one corner, reminiscent of medieval castles. Stone gargoyles, weathered by time, adorned the roof's edges, their grotesque expressions frozen in eternal grimaces. The main door was a work of art in itself, a massive piece of dark wood, carved with scenes that, even from a distance, seemed disturbingly violent. Wolves, or were they men? The figures seemed to writhe in the wood, trapped in a macabre dance. As I neared the entrance, I noticed two elements that stood out from the rest of the construction. First, a modern bronze statue positioned beside the door, depicting a humanoid figure twisted, as if in the process of a painful transformation. Second, a rusted metal plaque nailed to the door with an almost illegible inscription, Full Moon Sanatorium, 1823. The wind changed direction, bringing with it an even stronger odor of decay. I resisted the urge to cover my nose, fearing that any sudden movement might break the spell of the place and make me lose my nerve. I inhaled deeply, feeling the cold air fill my lungs, and reached out for the ornate doorknob. That's when I heard it. A low sound, almost imperceptible at first but gradually growing. A growl. No, not just a growl. A chorus of them, coming from all sides and nowhere at the same time. I quickly turned around, my heart racing, searching for the source of the sound. The garden was empty, the shadows still. "It's just your imagination, Carlos," I murmured to myself, my voice sounding strangely muffled in the dense night air. "This is why you came, isn't it? To get scared, to feel something." With a determined movement, I turned the doorknob. The door opened with a prolonged groan, as if the house were waking up from a long sleep. The interior was a pit of absolute darkness, swallowing the weak moonlight trying to penetrate it. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision I was about to make. Entering meant diving into the unknown, facing my deepest fears. Staying meant admitting defeat, going home empty-handed, and facing the failure of my career. With a resigned sigh, I took the first step into the mansion. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet, the sound echoing through the empty hallways. The air inside was even heavier, thick with dust and a metallic odor that reminded me of blood. I turned on my flashlight, the beam of light revealing a majestic yet decaying entrance hall. A large crystal chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, its pieces softly tinkling in the breeze that entered through the open door. Grand staircases led to the second floor, their steps covered by a faded and dusty red carpet. On the walls, oil portraits stared at me with hollow eyes. Men and women in outfits from bygone eras, their faces pale and stern. But there was something strange about them, something I couldn't quite identify immediately. I slowly advanced through the hall, my flashlight illuminating every corner. That's when I noticed. In each portrait, hidden in the shadows or partially obscured, there was the figure of a wolf. Sometimes it was just a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness. Other times a paw or a snout partially visible. A chill ran down my spine. The legend of the werewolf was beginning to take on a new dimension of reality, but I couldn't let fear take over. I was there to investigate, to find the truth behind the myth. I decided to start my exploration on the ground floor. To the right of the hall, a slightly open door led to what appeared to be a living room. I gently pushed it open, the creak of the rusty hinges echoing through the silent house. The room was large, with tall windows covered by heavy, dusty curtains. Antique furniture, draped in white sheets, created ghostly shapes in the dim light. In the center of the room, a stone fireplace stood out, its black mouth like a portal to another world. I approached the fireplace, noticing intricate carvings in the stone. Wolves running, men screaming, scenes of hunting and transformation. The images seemed to move under the flickering light of my flashlight, telling a silent story of horror and tragedy. That's when I noticed something strange on the floor in front of the fireplace. Marks. They weren't human footprints, nor entirely animal. They looked as if someone, or something, had dragged claws across the wooden floor, leaving deep grooves on the surface. I followed the marks with my eyes and the light from the flashlight. They led to a door in the opposite corner of the room. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to run away right then, to flee back to the safety of the outside world. But the other part, the part of the writer starving for a story, pushed me to continue. With hesitant steps, I crossed the room toward the mysterious door. The floorboards groaned under my feet, as if the house itself was protesting my intrusion. When I reached the door, I realized it was different from the others. More robust, made of metal instead of wood, with a small barred window at the top. A cell? I whispered to myself, the question hanging in the air like a cloud of dust. With trembling hands, I turned the doorknob. Locked. Of course it was. But why did a locked door in an abandoned house make me feel both relieved and disappointed at the same time? I turned my attention back to the rest of the room, determined to find more clues about the mansion's history. That's when I noticed something faintly glowing under one of the sheets covering the furniture. I cautiously approached, and with a quick motion, pulled the fabric away. A wave of dust rose, making me cough and rub my eyes. When the cloud settled, I saw that I had uncovered an old desk. On it, an object that made my heart skip a beat. A leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Carefully, I opened the journal. The first page contained a single sentence, written in an elegant yet shaky handwriting. May God have mercy on my soul, for the beast will not. I turned the page, eager to read more, to unravel the mystery of the house and its inhabitants. But before I could dive into the reading, a sound froze me in place. A howl, long and mournful, coming from somewhere inside the house. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't my imagination. It was real, close, and filled with a pain and hunger that hit me like a punch to the gut. The werewolf was awake, and I was no longer alone in the mansion. My whole body trembled at the sound of that howl. The journal almost slipped from my sweaty hands, but I gripped it tightly. It was my only clue, my only connection to the truth behind this cursed place. With frantic movements, I stuffed the journal into my backpack. My mind screamed at me to run, to abandon this madness while I still had a chance. But something stronger kept me there. Curiosity, the thirst for a story, maybe even a suicidal desire to confront the unknown. Another howl echoed through the house, this time closer. It seemed to come from upstairs. I swallowed hard, my eyes fixed on the staircase leading to the second floor. The darkness at the top seemed thicker, almost tangible. You came for a story, Carlos, I murmured to myself, trying to find courage. And what kind of story would it be if you ran at the first sign of danger? With hesitant steps, I approached the staircase. Each step groaned under my weight, as if the house itself was trying to warn me of the impending danger. The trembling beam of my flashlight lit the way, revealing more portraits on the walls. Now, there was no more subtlety. The wolves were prominent in every painting, their eyes seeming to follow me as I ascended. Upon reaching the second-floor landing, I was greeted by a long corridor. Closed doors lined both sides, each one promising secrets and horrors waiting to be discovered. The wallpaper, once elegant, now hung in strips, revealing dark stains underneath. A strong odor of mold and something more animalistic filled the air. I breathed through my mouth, trying not to imagine the source of the smell. I decided to explore the rooms one by one. The first door to my left was ajar. I gently pushed it open, revealing what seemed to have been a child's bedroom. A small bed occupied one corner, covered by a dusty quilt patterned with moons and stars. Old toys were scattered on the floor. Wooden blocks, a teddy bear missing one eye, and a worn leather ball. But it was what I saw on the opposite wall that made me stop. Mouth agape. Scratches, dozens, maybe hundreds of them, deep and violent, covering the wall from floor to ceiling. Some formed words, obsessively repeated, "Help me. I can't stop. The beast is coming." My heart pounded in my chest. What kind of creature could have done this? What kind of torment could drive someone or something to such an act of desperation? A sudden noise made me spin around. The teddy bear, which I was certain had been on the floor moments ago, was now sitting on the bed, its single-button eye fixed on me. "No," I whispered, retreating toward the door. "This isn't possible." Then I noticed the marks on the floor. Small footprints, like those of a child, made of a dark, viscous substance that shimmered under the flashlight's beam. They led from the bed to the door, passing right where I stood. Panic finally set in. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. Panting, I leaned against the corridor wall, trying to calm my racing breath and turbulent thoughts. "It's just your imagination," I repeated to myself like a mantra. "You're letting the atmosphere of the place get to you. This is what you wanted, right? To feel scared, to find inspiration." But part of me knew that was a lie. What I had seen and felt was too real, too visceral to be a mere product of my imagination. Determined to continue my exploration, even though every fiber of my being screamed for me to flee, I approached the next door. This one was firmly shut. The handle was cold to the touch, almost icy. As I turned it, I felt resistance, as if something on the other side was trying to keep the door closed. With a stronger push, the door suddenly gave way. The smell that emanated from the room almost made me gag. A mix of old blood, wet fur, and something even more primal and wild. The beam of my flashlight revealed a nightmarish scene. What had once been an elegant room was now completely destroyed. Shattered furniture was piled in the corners, and the curtains hung in strips as if they had been ripped apart by enormous claws. The vanity mirror was shattered, each fragment reflecting the light from my flashlight like glowing eyes in the darkness. But what caught my attention the most was the bed, or rather, what was left of it. The mattress was torn apart, its stuffing scattered across the floor like dirty snow. And in the center of the bed, something that made my blood run cold. Chains. Thick iron chains fastened to the bed frame, their ends terminating in cuffs large enough to restrain, what? A man? An animal? I slowly approached, hypnotized by the horror of the scene. The cuffs were open, stained with something that looked like dried blood and fur. Long, gray fur trapped in the hinges of the cuffs. A sudden movement in the corner of the room made me jump back. Something shifted in the shadows, something big. My flashlight shook in my hand as I pointed it in that direction. For a moment, a brief, terrifying moment, I thought I saw a pair of yellow eyes staring at me from the shadows. But when I blinked, they were gone. The sound of something heavy moving in the corridor made me spin around again. The bedroom door slammed shut with a bang, trapping me in the darkness with whatever was in there with me. My breathing was fast and shallow, my heart pounding so hard I was sure any creature within miles could hear it. Slowly, with my back against the wall, I began to inch toward the door. That's when I heard it, a low growl, almost a purr, coming from somewhere to my right. I turned the flashlight in that direction, but there was nothing there except shadows. "Who's there?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "What do you want?" The answer came in the form of another growl, this time louder and closer. The sound seemed to come from all sides at once, surrounding me, suffocating me. With trembling hands, I reached for the doorknob. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I twisted it frantically, pulling and pushing the door with all the strength I could muster. "Help!" I screamed, my fear finally overcoming any remnants of courage or curiosity. "Someone help me!" And that's when I felt it. A hot, damp breath on the back of my neck. The smell of blood and wet fur filled my nostrils. Slowly, terrified beyond measure, I turned around. Two yellow eyes stared at me in the darkness, gleaming with a cruel intelligence and a primal hunger. The creature, there was no other word for it, was a grotesque mix of man and wolf. Gray fur covered its muscular body, its hands ending in sharp claws, and its mouth. Oh God! Its mouth was full of fangs that looked like they could tear through steel. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body was paralyzed with fear, unable to move as the creature approached, its hot breath on my face. And then, to my utter astonishment, it spoke. A hoarse voice, more of a growl than words, but unmistakably human. "You shouldn't have come here, writer. Some stories aren't meant to be told." Before I could process what was happening, the creature, the werewolf, raised a massive claw. The last thought that passed through my mind before everything went black was, at least now, I have my story. I woke up with a start, my entire body aching. I was lying on the dusty floor of the room, the morning light streaming through the broken windows. Confused and disoriented, I slowly got to my feet, looking around. The room was exactly as I had found it the night before, destroyed with broken furniture and the bed with chains. but there was no sign of the creature. No claw marks, no fur, no blood. Was it all a dream? I muttered to myself, rubbing my eyes. But when I looked down at my hands, I froze. There were deep scratches on my arms, still bloody, and caught beneath my nails, long gray hairs. With my heart in my throat, I ran to the remains of the shattered mirror. The face that stared back at me wasn't entirely my own. My eyes, normally brown, now had a yellowish glow, and when I opened my mouth in a silent scream of horror, I saw that my teeth looked sharper. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The curse wasn't just real, it was now a part of me. I had my story, yes, but at what cost? Staggering, I left the room and made my way down the stairs, my mind in turmoil. When I reached the front door, I saw something that hadn't been there the night before. An envelope, pinned to the wood by an ornate silver dagger. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, with words written in elegant handwriting. "Welcome to the pack, writer. The full moon is in 2 weeks. We'll be waiting." I tucked the letter into my pocket, feeling the weight of the curse and the responsibility that now rested on my shoulders. I stepped out of the mansion into the daylight, knowing my life would never be the same. As I walked back to my car, a grim certainty settled in my heart. I had found my story, yes, but the story had also found me. And now it would continue through me, whether I wanted it to or not. The distant howl of a wolf echoed across the property, as if to seal my fate. I got into the car and started the engine, leaving the mansion behind, but knowing I would never truly leave it. A part of me would always belong to that place now. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind full of terror and fascination, I set off to tell my story, our story, the story of the werewolf who haunts the house next door, and now haunts me.